Hello again, gamers. Welcome back to the Board Game Captain. I'm the Captain, and today I'm going to be reviewing and telling you about Mazes. Mazes is a role-playing game separated up into 4 old-school RPG zine-sized books, which I have all here and have finished reading and I'm ready to review. So before I get started, I do want to give a big thank you to the company that produces Mazes, Ninth Level Games, for sending me this review copy of Mazes to check out and review. Thank you guys very much. I also would like to say I've got a ton of links in the description down below that you can check out at your leisure. There's a link to BoardGameCaptain.com, which is a great hub for all things Board Game Captain. There's also a link to my Teespring store if you'd like to get yourself some cool Board Game Captain merch, and a link to my Patreon if you're in a position to and would like to support the channel. All right, so Ninth Level Games, they do a bunch of these kind of zine-sized games. They sent me a bunch more to review as well, which I can't wait to get to. So if this sort of thing interests you, stay tuned. I'm going to be getting to a ton more of these. But I wanted to start with this one because it seems like it's the biggest and the newest. Most of the other games all are contained in just a single zine-sized book, whereas this one is split up into 4. So Mazes, book 1 is called Sword, and then book 2 is called Sorcery, book 3 is called Maze, and book 4 is called Monster. And basically it splits up the rules pretty categorically. If you are playing Mazes as a player and you want to be very familiar with the rule system, all you really need is Sword and Sorcery. I love that, by the way. And if you're playing as a game master, you will need all 4. But really, Maze and Monster are only really needed for the game master. Now, first I'm going to go through what's in these books, and then I'm going to discuss what this game is like, what the rule system is like, what it's about, what they're trying to achieve, and what my thoughts are on that. So without any further ado, let's get into it with Sword. So Sword is basically the rules of the game, the basics. They do specifically note there's no place in any of these 4 where they give you a full-on idea on how to role play. Even though this is actually quite an easy system to play, they're not intending it to be for beginning role players because it is a bit of an odd system to play. It's kind of niche. It's meant to be a throwback to the old late 1970s, early 80s role-playing games, the really first generation of RPGs, while still at the same time being done with more modern and easy-to-use rules. But because of its kind of niche appeal and bizarre abstract way of play, they're expecting people to play this after they already know what role-playing games are. So there's not a chapter in here anywhere on how to role-play. They're expecting you already know how to do that, so that you would, in fact, get the references in these books for the fact that there are a lot of throwback references to old school RPGs. Now, the first book, again, Sword, is mostly about the system itself and kind of what they're trying to achieve. It goes through the core system of the game. So I think this is as good a time as any to discuss the core system. It's very interesting. So to keep it simple, it's odd because there are certain parts of the system that are a bit advanced while at the same time still being very simple and easy to learn, and also very easy to know what dice to need to roll and what numbers to need to roll, even though, again, that part of it, the numbers themselves, if they didn't have a cheat sheet right on the character sheet, could be a bit advanced because it's a little odd. But the idea is each player gets, in addition to a character class, they get a role. And you get to pick your role, you get to pick your character class, you get to pick your edges. I'll get into that a little bit more with book 2, Sorcery. But the role, which the choices are Paragon, Vanguard, Fighter, and Sentinel, give you what die you roll for everything. You have 1 die. You'll need 2 of that die because if you have advantage or disadvantage, you will roll 2 of them. I'll explain that in a moment. But you only need 1 size die. So if you're a Paragon, you use D4s. If you are a Vanguard, you use D6s. If you're a Fighter, you use D8s. And if you're a Sentinel, you use D10s. Now, at first glance, you might say, well, why would I want the smaller dice? And it's because the different size dice are better at certain tasks. So the idea is meant to be that you're picking the die based on what kind of tasks you want to succeed at. So there are 4 types of tasks. All tasks are categorized into 4 categories. You have books. Books are things like knowledge, perception, skills, learning, charisma, senses. Now, books rolls succeed on a 2 or a 3, which means if you are the paragon and you've got a D4, you've got the best chance to succeed at books. You've got a 50% chance, you actually have more than that, but I'll get to that in a moment, to succeed on book rolls. So that becomes really good. This is a really good roll to take for a magical user character or a very learned and sweet-talking character. The second type of skill is boots. So boots are things that are dexterity, reflexes, agility, and speed-based, and that you would succeed on a 3, 4, or 5. So now a paragon is not bad at boots, but actually a vanguard is significantly better at boots, because with a 3, 4, or 5 on a D6, you're very likely to succeed. Again, you're even more likely than what I'm saying by the numbers here, because there are 2 other ways to succeed, but I'm going to get to that in a moment. But this is a good class for things like rangers and rogues. The next type of skill is blades. So obviously this is about violence, weapons, combat, fighting, dodging, things like that. And with blades, you succeed on a 4, 5, 6, or 7. So here's where we really start to see the fact that a paragon character who rolls a D4 only has a 1 in 4 chance of succeeding on blades. Whereas a fighter character who has a D8 has the best chance to succeed on blades. They have a huge chance. And then we have bones, which is like kind of a toughness, endurance kind of skill rolls. Endurance, resistance, strength, bravery, health, heart, these sort of things. And they succeed on a 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9, which means the sentinel is best at them because they get a D10. Now, there are some other things involved here. So first, I want to say that there is also advantage and disadvantage. So for advantage and disadvantage, you roll 2 dice. And for advantage, if you had advantage, if circumstances made it that you should be more likely to succeed, you get the higher of those 2 rolls. And that's really good. The second thing you have is disadvantage, which if you do that, you roll the 2 dice and you get the lower of the 2 rolls. Now, a couple of other things I want to talk about in regard to things that will affect your rolls. You have class and crown. Now, for class, that happens when you roll a 1, which is actually a good thing in this, if it's something that your class should be able to do. So let's say your role is a paragon and your class is you're a wizard, and you do something where a wizard should definitely be able to know that. Well, suddenly it's a books roll and it's something a wizard should be able to do. You succeed on a 1, 2, or a 3 on a 4-sided die. So you see, suddenly you're even better at it than you thought you would be. Now, again, the class roll of a 1, making a 1 succeed, only works in those circumstances where it's something that your class should know. So if you are a rogue, lockpicking. You get the idea. It's stuff that you should be good at. The other thing is crown. Now, crown is when you roll your top number on your die. A 4 for a D4, a 6 for a D6, an 8 for a D8, a 10 for a D10. Now, there is a darkness scale that is kept track of based on things happening in the game, and if things are going really well, it'll be considered bright. That's all the way on the your side of things. If things are going real bad, it's considered bleak. If it's in the middle, it's called torchlit. Now, if things are bright and you roll a crown on a skill roll, you auto-succeed. That is great. So again, going back to my example, now when things are bright and you're doing something that a wizard should know how to do and you're a wizard and it's a books roll, you have no chance of failure, which is really great. But when it's torchlit, things are like not so great. It's kind of in the middle. What happens is you succeed, but something bad has to happen to you. Maybe you take some damage or there's also a negative effect. And if it's bleak, you don't succeed. So this is one of those things where it's a little more advanced of a concept. You do have to keep track of how things are going in your current maze to see whether or not a crown roll will help you succeed. But whether or not the crown roll will help you succeed based on that sort of thing, after you succeed, you usually have to roll an effect roll, which you roll your die again. This is most commonly done for combat for how much damage you do to somebody. And a crown roll in that, regardless of the darkness level, is always going to explode and let you roll the die again and get more damage. So higher numbered dice can be much better at certain things. However, lower number dice actually have a better chance to get like beginner's luck and have exploding dice and get a lot of damage. So that is also really cool. And back to that wizard example, when doing spells, they have a big chance for those spells to get really lucky, where on normal times, they probably won't do as much damage as a fighter would do with a sword slice. Okay, so another thing I want to talk about with this system, which is really interesting, is this is a system where only the players ever roll. The Game Master never rolls. So if the Game Master has a monster or a villain attack the players, what happens is the players roll a save. You have various saves that you can roll based on your skills. Usually, like if you're parrying, it's probably going to be a blades roll, for instance. Now, they don't roll to attack you. They have a set amount of damage they do if they succeed, but you roll your save to see if you can succeed. Also, you have these points called star points that you can occasionally spend to do amazing things, like if you're casting a spell, have a big effect, or if you're doing an attack, do some big acrobatic attack, and they will auto-succeed. You can also use them for saves to auto-succeed at saves. A lot of the variation between characters is handled with things called edges, which should sound familiar to you. If you're into role-playing games, you know there's a lot of different terms for these, but extra bonus abilities that you can get. And the way damage works in this, which is really interesting, is that you have a number of hearts, and as you take damage, you will lose the hearts, and then you get to refill your heart meter by taking a condition, and the conditions are stress, tired, hurt, and then if you take all of those, the next condition is down, and then you would have to see if you're able to save that character or if that character is going to be possibly dying. It's not the most lethal system I've ever read, but there is a definite chance of losing characters in this system. Treasure and equipment is also handled in a very abstract way to keep things light and fast and not have to deal with shopping or, bookkeeping in regard to arrows or do we have a rope or not. Instead, you just sort of have a level of treasure and you spend a level of it to have something. Oh yeah, by the way, we had a grappling hook. Okay, and then you just use it. This is a bit odd. I have things I like about this part of the system and things that I'm a little iffy on. One thing I'm iffy on is that there is no equipment in these books at all. So it doesn't matter the weapon you're using. That's really just flavoring. So if you're playing a warrior, you could be using an axe, a sword, a halberd. It doesn't matter. They do the same damage because you're always rolling the same die that you got for your roll. If you're being a fighter, you probably took the roll that gave you either a D8 or a D10, depending on whether you want to be more offensive or defensive. The D8 is better for offense, while the D10 does more actual damage, a little less likely to hit, but is also better for defense. They're the toughest characters. They're the tanks. But it doesn't actually change. So it can be whatever you say it is in your hands. It doesn't matter what the weapon is. So you can get really creative with that, and that can be kind of fun. But at the same time, I do think it's a little odd not having any specific equipment in there. So the second book, Sorcery, the first big thing in Sorcery is it deals with character creation. And it does it in a really cool way where there's a lot of like asking your players questions. Do you want your character to be like this? Why is your character doing that? Those sort of things. And when they answer them, it helps them to create their character. It then also deals with the entirety of the magic system in this, which is quite creative, and lets you really decide, like there's almost like a couple of systems in here, and you can totally decide what to use. It's like a toolbox. Pick how you want to make your magic using character, and what you don't want to use you can leave behind. You can basically base it either around a type of magic, like a school of how you learned your magic or how you got your magic, or you can base it around an element. It's pretty cool. I do really dig that. I like how they're trying to be very creative with that. Now, the third book is Maze. So Maze gets into, as the game master, how to create a maze for your players to play in. It goes over all of the specifics of things like creating your own monsters, creating your own mazes, how you should balance things. This is a really well done book. This was the point where I really started to get how this game is meant to play, what they are going for. The first two let me really understand the rules system, but this one let me understand their intent, which I really started to love this game at this point when I got to Maze. And then the final book is Monster. So Monster starts with a bestiary of monsters. They've already explained to you how to make the monsters, and the rules on monsters are very basic. Monsters have 2 stats only, and then they have edges themselves, and that's really it. So you come up with your monster, you give it stats, you give it edges. Then there's a big section here on converting some like old school, what they call old school Renaissance, which refers to like first generation role-playing games like the original D&D, as well as modern clones to those old school role-playing games. It has a full section on converting monsters from those to this game system, which the game system is known as the polymorph game system. It's not difficult, and it totally makes sense, and I really like how they did this. But then in addition to that, in the previous book, they had told you, come up with your own monsters. One of the big parts of this is trying to get back that sort of wonder and amazement that people had in the late 70s and early 80s, the first time they played Dungeons and Dragons or another role-playing game system from that first generation era. And they had no idea what these creatures were. The first time someone came up against a rust monster and was like, oh my God, it destroyed my equipment. You know, that sort of thing. That sort of amazing sense of discovery. So they do recommend, like, come up with your own monsters that do all sorts of weird things so your players can be surprised. But then in addition to that, they do have some recreations of monsters. There's a monster in here called the Masquerade, which very much feels like a mimic, obviously, based on how it's written. And there's other creatures in here then that, again, very much feel like other kinds of monsters you have probably faced in basic sword and sorcery role-playing games. After you get past all of that, though, the next section is a set of 3 adventures to play in the game of Mazes. And they are fully fleshed out, though, again, keeping with the creative feeling of this game. They don't fully give you, like, they tell you how to express the clues to your players. They'll tell you this is what's really going on, but then you got to kind of do a little creation yourself. Figure out, okay, well, this is what's really going on. Now, how do I drop hints and clues to that to my players? That's for you to come up with. And I dig that they did it that way. It does feel very old school, again, with a very modern, easy, light system to use to play with. So this game is very odd. Now, there is an advancement system, but it's not experience points and it is not leveling. The advancement system, this is very loose and very light, and it's basically made because one of the most interesting things about this game is it's not meant to play proper campaigns. They talk about a lot in this book that they're trying to emulate with this system old school low fantasy adventure novels, things like the old Conan novels and stuff like that, as well as certain movies like that where the characters are already really badass and don't really need to level up much, and they can show up at any time during their lives, and regardless, they're already super skilled and super powerful. They might get a little bit more throughout, but generally speaking, they're already quite capable characters. In addition, it's not meant to play a campaign. It's more meant to play either one-offs or a series of loosely connected stories. So more like being a series of novellas set in the same universe, where you're going to have some characters, show up in various novellas in the same universe, but it's not always going to be the same cast of characters. So if you're playing this with a group of people and you're going to play a bunch of games, people could show up to one game or not show up to one game. Their character just won't be in that game because it's not really a continuing story. It's another episodic adventure. It's another standalone adventure in the same universe. Certain bad guys that were from previous adventures may show up again, and you might save them for ones where players are playing some of the characters that were in that adventure, so they'll know, oh, that was evil so-and-so who we met, a couple games ago. But generally speaking, it's more meant to just be sort of standalone games. So because of that, this system really feels like it lends itself very well for one-offs at conventions or parties, or also to be like a backup role-playing system that you can play for, like, let's say you have an actual campaign in a role-playing system going and 1 or 2 people can't show up, and this is like your backup role-playing game because it's very quick and easy to come up with a story for people to play in this. You can be like, oh yeah, so-and-so and so-and-so couldn't make it to game night this night, but the other 3 of you are here, so why don't we just play mazes instead, and we'll pick that up. And they're like, oh yeah, I wanted to make another quick character creation. This takes like 5 minutes, so it'd be so quick and easy once you've already got experience making characters. If you want to make a different character, also you could have a few characters made if you wanted to swap them out quickly back and forth. And again, the advancement is so minor that you can just jump in or jump out with characters. So the advancement system, if you do play the same character repeatedly, goes like this. The second time they show up, you're allowed to remove one of their edges and give them a different one to give them a different sort of ability. The third time they show up, they actually get an advancement. And then the advancement, their choices. They can get another separate edge. They can get better at a certain edge, become like super expertise at that, or they can get tougher where they get an extra status that they can get that doesn't actually have anything negative to it. It's called veteran, where like the first time someone would beat you up and you'd have to remove all your hearts, instead of getting a status that negatively affects you, you get veteran, which means you shrug off that level of damage. All of that is actually really cool and very easy to do. There's not a lot of bookkeeping and time taken up by leveling up in this. Again, it's not true leveling up, but advancing if you do the advancements. And again, this is a very different sort of thing. So I like this, and I've gone back and forth with this a lot because I've been having trouble figuring out where I'm going to rate this, because it's so different from most other role-playing games in my collection. I mean, the thing about the gamers, the players always rolling and the game master not rolling, I've seen stuff like that before. The thing where it's very simplified dice rolls, I've seen that. But the whole feel of it, that the whole episodic, this is not a campaign, we're playing one-offs, they are loosely connected. You can have a character from a previous one-off show up or not, or you could just jump in and play a different character. It's a very different feeling, very unique to me. Though obviously I'm about to be getting more experience with this because I've got a ton of more that they sent me that I can't wait to check out, and I'm very interested to check out that they made. Yeah, I like this. This is really cool. It's really different, and I have to applaud designers, and I forgot to mention earlier, the designer is Chris O'Neill. I have to applaud Chris O'Neill because I really love it when designers want to take something old, something new, wrap it together in a new package and make something unique. And that's kind of what they did here. You got the old feeling of old school role-playing, you have new feeling of new game mechanics, and you have this totally new feeling, it feels to me, of the style of the actual game. The actual role-play experience feels kind of old, but kind of new. And it's presented in a new way. I also really dig these zines. I like them doing them in these little zines. I mean, these are black and white printing, staple binding. It's nothing to rave about in regard to production, but it has this very nostalgic feel, because back in the 80s, you used to see a lot of little role-playing zines like this in comic book shops, and that was it gives it a fun nostalgic feel, and I dig that they kind of did all their games like that. So there you go, 8 stars out of 10 for me for Mazes, and I am very excited to check out the others. So be sure to tune in, because again, they sent me a ton. I've got Rebel Scum, which I'm pretty sure you can figure out what kind of feeling we're going for with that. We've got Business Wizards, The Excellence, The Very Good Dogs of Chernobyl, and Savage Sisters. So I am quite excited to check all these out, especially because I do really dig the role-playing game system, and I can't wait to see how it goes with other themes. I think one thing I would really like to see done with this, which I'm not sure, Savage Sisters looks pretty dark, but I would really like to see kind of a horror game run with this system. I think this would be a really good system for one-off horror-themed games. And if none of these other games do that, I'm probably going to do that myself, because this system is so easy to use as a toolbox and do it on your own. I definitely would like to use it for like a haunted house type game or a monster type game. That'd be really cool. But yeah, there you go. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, either on the game of Mazes or the polymorph system or this video, feel free to put them in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this video and you'd like to see me do more like it, be sure to give it a like, share it on all forms of social media, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to the Board Game Captain. That's Captain spelled with a K on YouTube. And until next time, game on.